This video is sponsored by Valencia. As movies have progressed with better cameras, more resolution, laser projectors, better sound, bigger theaters, and rising popcorn costs, one thing can still make a showing a pleasant experience or bring it to a grinding halt: the theater chair. If you're sitting watching Oppenheimer for 3 hours and you want to be immersed, the last thing you want is an old, creaky, stiff, hard chair to sit in, giving you a headache 15 minutes into the movie. Of course, thanks to modern technology, movies aren't just for theaters anymore. And thanks to that, we have a lot more freedom to choose where we sit down to watch them. But the theatrical experience is still very much alive. And when you're in a cinema, your comfort in the venue is the basic starting point for the experience. So it's worth asking, how did these seats change over time? From wooden chairs, cry rooms, home theater seating, and hot tub seating. Take a seat and kick back as we dive into the evolution of movie theater seating. It can be hard to imagine what a time before film actually looked like. And it turns out that even massive cultural touchstones in our society today started out as a grassroots operation. But early on, when it comes to seating, things weren't all that cushy and glamorous. Oh, the river Rhine sings by the linden tree. But really, for the early history of movie pictures, the experience would rarely last past a minute, meaning you didn't really need that seat to be that nice. But that was about to change. In 1901, a group of American male performers, known as the White Rats, who usually were the main attraction at most theaters, went on strike. This left theaters scrambling for something to fill the void, so they turned to films. And this would lead to longer films culminating in the first theater devoted solely to films, the Electric Theater in Los Angeles, that opened in 1902. This theater was merely a tent, but it was the first theater dedicated solely to showing films, and its first screening was a film called New York in a Blizzard. The seating situation was not even close to being high class in those temporary pop-up cinemas, however. For better accommodations and offering screenings for bigger audiences, a theater needed a more permanent location. But soon after, the first Nickelodeon would open in Pittsburgh in 1905 and would create the storefront movie theater craze that would expand to more than 8,000 Nickelodeons across the US by 1908. And judging from the photos from these early theaters, we start to begin to see a bit more thought into the theater seating at this time, with chairs that were more theater-like, you could say, yet still looking incredibly uncomfortable. And this was somewhat due to theater still being considered a lower-class attraction early in its history. But as cinema continued to grow as a medium, its reputation did as well. And theater owners started to see an opportunity of a higher class of viewing, with the 1920s seeing a development of luxury cinemas, known as theater palaces. Kitted out with luxury seats and ornate architecture, the kind of place audiences would wear a suit and tie to, and back in those days, a top hat. And these venues were incredibly large scale, designed to seat thousands of people, with ushers being recruited to show people to their seats and act as crowd management, and lounges to hold people outside of the aisles, sometimes even using mirrors to reflect the image of the movies from the projection booths into these areas. At the time, these were miracles of modern technology for the wealthy and affluent. But as we know, cinema going today has returned to its state as a medium for the masses, with that high-class sheen wearing off despite the glamorous images still projected by the industry as a whole. As a result, many of these theater palace venues have lost their palace style and were outcompeted by cheaper cinemas and the onset of TV, either falling into disrepair, being destroyed, or being refitted into new venues like shops and churches. However, there were some more quirky inventions back in the 1920s as well. In 1923, a Massachusetts inventor came up with a seat that literally sank into the ground when the user twisted a knob, allowing the user to get out of their seat without shuffling through crowds. And then when you wanted to come back, you lift your seat back up into place, and I guess that just never came to fruition, which kind of makes sense. But that didn't stop an inventor in Seattle having another go later in 1931. One of the main perks suggested with this invention was that it would allow audiences to move their knees back and allow other arrivals to pass them to get to their seats. And while these theater palaces and cool movie theater seating concepts are fascinating, it's kind of crazy to have a lot of these and more in our own homes today. Like these theater seats that Valencia sent us to check out, combined with all the luxury of a theater palace seating with premium Italian Napa leather, and all of the trappings of a well-designed theater chair like motorized reclining, LED lights, USB plugs, cup holders, and more. I can kind of trick myself into thinking that I'm at the theater. We've tested out these theater seats the entire time we were researching and writing for this video, and we're really impressed with them. And it's actually pretty cool how Valencia lets you customize the color of the chairs to fit the mood of your theater room, or even how the chairs are designed to allow you to easily add more seats on if your theater room keeps expanding. With fun features like hideaway storage, lumbar support, and an adjustable powered headrest that makes getting that viewing angle just right to see a movie, we really can't recommend these seats enough. And Valencia, especially if you're in the market to build a theater room at home and are in search for some really great theater seats. I mean, we've done the research, so we should know. Now, we've included a link below if you'd like to check out Valencia for yourself, and we encourage you to do that. And in 1933, a more radical and more successful idea came about. Some of the industry thought, do we really need these seats to be stationary? Or do we even need them at all? This was the idea of park-in or drive-in movie theaters, where you would show up to watch screenings from the comfort and privacy of your car. You could now enjoy a movie. These were a phenomenon up until the 1950s, but after that, their heyday started to fade, and now they exist as a kind of novelty or nostalgia trip. But yet another strange novelty from this era was the cry room. A soundproof theater room separated from the rest of the seats in the back of the auditorium. This debuted in the 1940s, so parents could take bratty children and their very vocal babies without turning the rest of the audience psychotic. But these never really caught on and died out, eventually just being turned into smoke rooms in the 1970s before being lost to the history of cinema, and probably that cigarette smoke smell too. What sadly didn't end as quickly as the invention of the cry room or adjustable theater seats was one of the darkest eras of American history. With the last remaining Jim Crow laws being phased out by 1965, for a big chunk of time in cinema history, film was as segregated as the rest of America, and for a long time the segregation in the movie industry wasn't addressed. Black Americans were subjected to worse treatments by theaters, being forced to use their own designated seating, usually in much smaller areas that were often balconies at the back of the theater that could be accessed by a side entrance to the building. Not being allowed into regular auditoriums likely meant that these guests inside of a white theater would have had more uncomfortable seating if they had seating at all. On top of their less than ideal position, these areas were often not cleaned or well maintained. Segregation was the law, which meant that even hosts who refused to segregate their viewer base by race were forced to, or else their theaters might have been shut down by the government. Fortunately, segregation wasn't there to stay, and with the abolition of Jim Crow laws and the ethnic divisions within the country being tackled, allowing everyone to enjoy the cinema, like watching a really good movie in a comfortable seat without being divided by racist laws. Leaving this shameful period behind, more incredibly influential productions emerged in the 70s, with Jaws, Star Wars, and Alien coming into the silver screens, presenting the world with some new, talented directors and multimedial franchises which would become irreplaceable cultural artifacts in the decades to come. The entertainment industry was arguably becoming more and more captivating. If you grew up watching plenty of films in the cinema, you may have invited your significant other or a date to watch a movie together, or you likely ended up in one of those seats sitting right next to a friend or stranger with way too much contact, which only made the rest of the viewing experience infinitely more uncomfortable. However you ended up in one of those seats, you likely noticed that they impact the viewing experience of any given film significantly, which is only achieved with the removal of one armrest. In some venues, a love seat can be fancier than in others, making it possible for couples to even recline and lay on their seats, which makes it impossible for them, or anyone around them, to pay attention to the film they intended to watch. With the dividing armrest gone, it is made substantially easier for couples to sit together, which is a great feature, especially for younger audiences. It turns out that these love seat film experiences have become a market of their own, with some venues specializing in providing comfort with sofas and pillows, making some theaters just rank higher on the comfort score. Everyman Cinemas in the UK, for instance, are perfect locations for a date, with sofa seats, blankets, and even food and alcohol being delivered to you during the film. What more could one ask for? Aside from more privacy, of course. Speaking of privacy, if you're keen on experiencing movies with your full attention away from French kissing couples or chewing sounds or children, these kinds of theaters are definitely not for you. The dine-ins, though, are. Theaters, which are part cinema, part restaurant. AMC, as an example, have an entire chain of these theaters, which of course harbor a seating design of their own. The seats within a dine-in's auditorium tend to be more spacious, being equipped with trays or tables viewers could put their plates on, making choking on food on a particularly scary scene in The Nun 2 easier and more accessible than ever in other venues. Even crazier cinema concepts exist, such as watching movies in hot tubs while drinking a lot of alcohol.
Whoa, this is some trippy shit. What the Is this for real?
Now, here's a question for you. What's in a color? Theater seats come in a variety of them, but the most common one is red, and we kind of wondered why. According to the website Seatcraft, the red color scheme has some deeper motivations behind it than just looking nice. The color is said to have a psychological effect as well, evoking emotions and drawing people into the films they watch in the process, as well as being less sensitive on the eyes, making the theater appear darker, allowing audiences to focus on the film without being distracted by their surroundings. So a red seat won't get in your way, but it'll subtly draw you into the background. And I'll be honest, many people are just too lazy to go out these days, and who wants to deal with the people talking during the movie, bringing in their kids who are way too young to be there, that have light-up shoes on, and hoping that they even have a decent speaker system. That's why home theaters are becoming the go-to for a lot of people. With television, projectors, and streaming services creating high-quality content, it makes sense why many are sticking to staying at home. And with these awesome theater seats from our sponsor Valencia, we got a little inspired to create our own theater room. So watch out for a short on how we set this all up. But really, after all this talk about theater seats, I think I might just stick to home cinema. This is actually kind of great. Now I will say, the only thing that would make this better is if someone could fit an IMAX screen and an IMAX projector in the house for me.
IMAX. It's Christopher Nolan's, it's Christopher Nolan's, it's Christopher Nolan's world of practical effects.